Hello friends, I'm Chadwick and this is Faith and Performance, where we explore the testimony of the biblical prophets and how they perfectly correlate with the current events of today. Thank you for joining us. Friends, in this episode, we're going to discover Daniel 8 as we conclude our three-part series on Daniel 2, Daniel 7, and now Daniel 8. Before we commence, it's important to understand that in the last two videos, we discovered Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 and the four kingdoms in both chapters and how we're starting to see these kingdoms come to fulfillment at the end of the age. And we also discovered in those videos, how do we understand that we're living in these times, we're living in these seasons that the biblical prophets has ordained as the terminal generation or the last generation. So we'd like to go through that really quick before we touch on Daniel 8 and go through those scriptures that ties into Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. When we look at the days of creation, the 7-day creation plan, I believe it's the beginning of understanding of how we're going to look at the end of the age, because it's very prophetic. When you look at the days of creation, the Lord worked 6 days and he rested on the 7th day. So he gave us a pattern to go on, or he established a pattern to go on of working 6 and resting on the 7th. As we know, we're commanded to work 6 days and rest on the 7th, the Sabbath day. In Leviticus 25, the children of Israel were ordered to work 6 years and rest on the 7th year. So again, the pattern continued of not only days, but also years of working 6 and resting on the 7th year. So what a great blessing that was, for sure. So he gave us this pattern of understanding of working 6, rest on the 7th, days, years. And now when we look at 2 Peter 3:8 and also Psalms 90, it says a day is 1,000 years and 1,000 years is a day. So what can we make of that? I believe it reverts us back to the days of creation, the 7-day creation plan, very prophetic. So when we look at that, it's meaning that the earth will work 6,000 years or 6 completed days. And then on the 7th day, the 7,000 year, that's the day of the Lord. That's the day of Jesus, Yeshua, the Messiah, to return for his second coming. And for 1,000 years, he will reign in that 7th day, that 7,000th year to the 8,000th year. So the days of creation is very prophetic. I believe it's the beginning of understanding that we are living at the end of the age when we look at everything. And so how can we calculate it? Well, from Adam to Messiah was 4 completed days, or 4,000 completed years on the timeline. And now, as we know, from Messiah till now has almost been 2 completed days, or 2,000 completed years, which gives us a total of almost 6 completed days, or almost 6,000 completed years, which is, we're knocking on the door to that 7th day, the 7,000th year, when the Messiah will return. It's the day of the Lord that the biblical prophets thoroughly talk about in the prophets. When they say the day of the Lord, is speaking of the 7th day, the 7,000th year, when he will return. It'll be a millennial rest, if you will. Just like there was a day rest, there's a year rest, now there's a millennial rest, which is the 7,000th year to the 8,000th year, or the 7th day to the 8th day, which would be eternity for the 8th day. That's what the number 8 means, is new beginnings, new life, etc. So it's so important when we look at how do we understand that we know we're living at the end of the age. That's where we begin. And as we know, and just like we calculated, we're at that point. As we know, Messiah was crucified, resurrected, and ascended at AD 30, AD 33, wherever you want to put that. And this is not to set dates, but when you do the calculation, you can see that we're living at the end of the age before his return, where he sits on David's everlasting throne in Jerusalem and rules the nations, so to speak. So I believe that is the main understanding that we can get. We are living at the end of the age, and now we'll bring it up to more modern times with Israel becoming a nation again in 1948. That was a huge marker on God's prophetic timeline. I believe it was the marker that opened the door for the rest of the end of the age prophecies to be fulfilled, including Daniel 2, Daniel 7, and as we'll see today in Daniel 8. It is so important because that had to come to fulfillment. 1967 had to come true as well, with the children of Israel recapturing Jerusalem as their capital during the 6-day war. Those are important markers. They had to be back into the promised land. They had to control Jerusalem. there had to be an aliyah or return of the Jewish people to the Promised Land. There's been over 4 million Jewish people returned to the Promised Land since 1948, which is incredible. So we were seeing all of these signs, all of these markers of the return of the Messiah is imminent, so to speak. And now I believe when we look at the book of Daniel, we look at Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Daniel 8, these 4 kingdoms that are going to rise at the end of the age. Well, I believe we're starting to see those kingdoms rise and fall as we speak. And just like we discovered in Daniel 2, Daniel 7, and what we're going to get into in Daniel 8, it's so important. I think it's the basic understanding to understand where we are on God's prophetic timeline, just like 1948, just like 1967, just like when we're seeing these 4 kingdoms or the return of the Jewish people. All of these things culminating together, and also what Messiah warned about in Matthew 24, with the Olivet Discourse, Matthew 24 and 25. You're starting to see all these signs come together at one time, like he said, when he commanded us to watch, to pay attention, to be a wise virgin, not a foolish virgin, to keep our lamps lit with oil, so that we understand what is going on with the world, so we can anticipate the blessed hope, the Redeemer, the King, the Messiah, to come and restore things back to their original intent, first in Israel and Jerusalem and then upon the nation. So what a great hope that is as we go forward, and that's why we do study the book of Daniel, the prophets. They're called prophets for a reason, to prophesy to the end of the age what we can expect to go on. So I think we're living at one of the most amazing times in history, like the first coming events, if you will, because we're seeing all of these things start to culminate, and we just have to have a responsible understanding of it and come together and look forward to the return of the Messiah. So in the last 2 videos, we've discovered Daniel 2 and also Daniel 7. That's where the 4 kingdoms are established. I believe those 2 chapters are confirmation of each. They mirror each other. There's 4 kingdoms that will rise to power. We discovered both of those, and we'll go through those real quick. We discovered, and the prophet told us himself who the kingdoms were. We didn't have to guess. So in Daniel 2 and 7, there's 4 kingdoms. Both are the same, and I'll go in sequence with them. The first one was the Babylonian Empire. They were represented by the gold in Nebuchadnezzar's statue dream in Daniel 2. They were represented as the lion in Daniel 7. The second kingdom is Medo-Persia, which that is Iran in its modern form. Babylon was Iraq, by the way, but Medo-Persia is Iran. They were symbolism of the silver. And then also in Daniel 7, they were the bear. And then the third kingdom is Yavon. It might say Greece in some translations, just like we'll see in Daniel 8, but it's really Yavon. What that is, that's Turkey. That's the old Grecian Empire, if you will. They were symbolism of the bronze. And then also we have the leopard in Daniel 7. And then the fourth empire in Daniel 2 was the iron. It was one that crushed everything. So there's the Antichrist kingdom. That's the beast kingdom, if you will, with the 10 toes, which represents the 10 kings. And then we have in Daniel 7, what do we have? We have the conglomerate as well. That will be the 10 kings as well. He had 10 horns on his head, and it reverted to Revelation 13, 1 through 2. One beast, 10 horns. It was a match between Daniel 7's fourth kingdom, and Revelation is the same beast. John said it was a lion, a bear, and a leopard, which means the first 3 beast kingdoms in Daniel 7 will be the conglomerate. Okay, he said, I saw a lion, a bear, and a leopard as one kingdom. So it's going to be the conglomerate kingdom in Daniel 7's fourth kingdom, and also Revelation 13, 1 through 2. It's the same kingdom, the fourth kingdom in Daniel 2 with the 10 toes. 10 toes, 10 horns. It's the same symbolism. And then what do we see? We see the return of the Messiah in both, that will crush the 10 toes, up to the statue, the whole conglomerated area, land area of the beast kingdom. Same thing in Daniel 7. It's one beast, but it's all in sequence. We'll see these kingdoms 1 through 4 go in sequence together, and then the Messiah will return. So we saw this beautiful correlation between these 2 chapters. Yes, it did happen in history, but as we know, history repeats itself. It will happen again. Daniel 2 says this is for the latter days. Okay, and then he says, in the days of these kings, that the Messiah, the stone, will return and crush them together. That he will crush them together. So it's not a span of 2,500 years with with Nebuchadnezzar, Cyrus, and Alexander. These will be in sequence. Even though it happened like that in Nebuchadnezzar, Cyrus, and Alexander, it will happen the same way, in sequence, all together at once, and then the stone will crush the 10 kings, the 10 toes, the 10 horns of the Antichrist kingdom, and then set up the kingdom that will have dominion forever and ever. It will be an everlasting kingdom, as we know, the 7th day, the 7,000th year of the Messiah. So it's so important when we look at Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Daniel 8, they work together perfectly. And Daniel 8 is that transition chapter between the second kingdom and the third kingdom. Okay, so we've discovered before, Babylon, Iraq has fallen, and then Iran has been the superpower of the Middle East. Now we're going to see Daniel 8 show that transition between Iran and Turkey with the transition of the kingdom, so that Turkey will be the dominant superpower of the Middle East, and then it will split up, as we will see in Daniel 8, and then the 10 kings will come about after Turkey reaches its peak, if you will, and a couple events happen that we will discover. So these chapters, they work together in unison. Remember, Daniel 12:4 said the visions, the book is sealed till the time of the end. Well, the time of the end is the time of the end. Again, 2,500 years ago, runs into a lot of problems when you're dealing with eschatology. That's not the latter days, because remember, we got 6,000 completed years where you're halfway home there, if you will, and that runs into a lot of problems with being the end of the age. The latter days is not a distance like that. They're going to happen in sequence, and as we discovered in the 2 videos in summary, you've started to see those come to fruition since 2003 and on forward. We're going to see that. We're going to tie in a lot of cool statistics with you, with everything, to let you understand how this is going to evolve going forward, and just to keep your eye on Iran and also the nation of Turkey. So it's important as we go forward to realize that there's always an interpretation of these dreams and visions. Daniel 2, Daniel had the interpretation with his 3 friends to Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel 7, there was an interpreter for the vision that Daniel has. And then Gabriel, the angel himself, is quoted telling Daniel that this vision is for the end of the age. It's for the latter days, and we're going to read through it. So we're going to read through it. It's going to be symbolism again, but the angel Gabriel will confirm who these nations are, which goes with what we've spoke about before. So in Daniel 8, it says this: "In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after the one that appeared to me the first time, which was Daniel 7. I saw in the vision, it was so happening while I looked, I was in Shushan, the citadel, which is in the province of Elam, and I saw in the vision that I was by the river Ulai." So as we look at this, it's important always to remember, just like when in Daniel 7, he was by the Mediterranean. He saw 4 beasts out of the Mediterranean Sea, the Great Sea. So he's telling you to look in that geographical area of the Middle East. Well, now in Daniel 8, we're seeing that he was in Iran. Elam is Iran, and he was by the river Ulai, which is basically western Iran. So it's important to know where he was standing in the vision, standing in the dream, if you will, because that's going to give us great insight about who this is about and what is going to transition from this, okay? So it's important. He's in Elam, which is Iran, standing by the river, and then he's going to see 2 beasts that rise. In Daniel 8, verse 3, it says, "Then I lifted my eyes and I saw, and there standing beside the river was a ram, which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward, northward, and southward, so that no animal could withstand him, nor there could be any deliver from his hand, but he did according to his will, and he became great." So Daniel standing in Elam, Iran, by the river, and he sees this ram. It has 2 horns. The second horn came up greater than the first one, and then he began pushing westward, northward, and southward. Okay, so that no animal or no kingdom could withstand him, and he did according to his will, and he became great. So let's keep that in mind as we start to unfold this prophecy. Gabriel is going to pronounce who this is, and then we'll tie in modern day events on this. So we have this animal, that's a ram. He's very symbolic, and we'll find out who that is. pushing westward, northward, and southward. So again, to give you some hint, if you will, if he's standing in Iran, well, that tells you pretty much who that is, and he's going to be pushing the ram northward, westward, and southward from that Elam area. Okay, in verse 5 it says this, "And as I was considering, suddenly a male goat came from the west across the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. Then he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing beside the river, and ran at him with furious power. And I saw him confronting the ram. He was moved with rage against him, attacked the ram, and broke his 2 horns. There was no power in the ram to withstand him, but he cast him to the ground and trampled him, and there was no one that could deliver the ram from his hand." So this is speaking about 2 kingdoms that are going to clash together, war together, as the ram became dominant. And as Daniel was considering the ram, a male goat came from the west. So Daniel was standing in Iran, western Iran, and now he's seeing this goat coming from the west, which is across the Middle East, if you will, and without touching the ground, etc. He came to the ram, he smashed the ram with furious power, confronting him, raging against him, attacked him, and there was no power in the ram to withstand him, but he cast him to the ground and trampled him, and no one delivered the ram from his hand. So when we identify who the ram and the goat is going to win this war. That's what the prophecy states, that the ram will have power, but then the goat will crush him and will be the superior, dominant superpower of that area. Okay, in verse 8 it says this, "Therefore the male goat grew very great, but when he became strong, the large horn was broken, and in the place of it 4 notable horns came up toward the 4 winds of heaven, and out of one of them came a little horn which grew exceedingly great towards the south, towards the east, and towards the glorious land. And it grew up to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the hosts, some of the stars to the ground, trampled them. He even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifices were taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Because of transgression, an army was given over to the horn to oppose the daily sacrifices and to cast truth down to the ground. He did all of this, and he prospered." So once the goat attacks the ram and becomes the dominant superpower, this nation will become strong, it will become great, and then the large horn represents the leader of it. Okay, and then the large horn will be broken, okay, and we'll find out what happens to him, and then it will become 4 regions. It will become 4 horns. Well, horns are symbolic for kingdoms, as we have known in the book of Revelation. Also here, horns are symbolic for kings. Okay, so the male goat grows great, the large horn or the leader falls, he's no longer in power, and then 4 kingdoms come out of the goat nation, and we'll find out who that is. And then out of those 4 kingdoms, the little horn will rise out of that. We know the little horn from last week's video is the Antichrist. Just like we've discovered in last week's video, the 10 kings are in place, and then the little horn rises among them and conquers 3, Libya, Sudan, and Egypt. Well, this is the same symbolism. 4 of the 10 kings are going to come out of this goat nation, and then the Antichrist rises among the 4. So it gets even more narrower with the understanding of there's 10 kings and he comes up among them. Well, then Daniel 8 solidifies it's going to be in that certain region of where this goat nation is. In there, it's not even going to be in the 10 kings, it's going to be in the 4 kings. He's going to come up between there. So he narrows the search, if you will, of where we should be looking, not on all of the 10 kings, which is Libya, Sudan, Egypt, and then there's 4 in this area. He's saying, hey, look at where these 4 are, and then you're going to see the rise of the Antichrist, and then he goes south. Okay, so that should tell you a little bit, south towards the glorious land, towards the east. He grows, he's arrogant, he's prideful, all of these things that we see in the scriptures. He takes away the Jewish daily sacrifices, which tells you that they will be doing them then. So that's during that 7-year tribulation period where I believe that they will be doing the sacrifices. They will be doing all of these things according to the Torah of what they believe. Okay, and then he will oppose the daily sacrifices. He will abominate the temple. All of these things that we know about but it begins with the 4 kingdoms that come out of this goat nation, and then he rises amongst the 4 of them. Okay, as we can continue in verse 13, it says, "Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another one said to the certain one who was speaking, How long will the vision be concerning the daily sacrifices and the transgression of desolation and giving of both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot? And he said to me, 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleaned." Okay, cleansed. Okay, so there's some different interpretations on this. Some people will do it from when Alexander, okay, the Grecian Empire, he was that large horn where most people think. They'll start counting the days, but they will do it as years. Okay, so 2,300 years, and then they'll do the calculation to the end of the age. And some will do it literal, 2,300 days. They'll back it up from the second coming to that time. You can do what you want to with that. My philosophy is let's just watch these kingdoms come to fruition, and whether this is historical or not, we will understand by the 4 kingdoms that we've identified in Daniel 2, Daniel 7, and now we're seeing this transition in Daniel 8, because we're going to see the language that the angel Gabriel used when he was doing that. So on that note, we'll see what the angel says here. In verse 15 it says, "Then it happened when I, Daniel, had seen the vision and was seeking the meaning, that suddenly there stood before me one having the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Eli, who called and said, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. So he came near when I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell on my face. But he said to me, Understand, son of man, that the vision refers to the time of the end. Now as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep with my face to the ground. But he touched me and stood me upright, and he said, Look, I'm making known to you what shall happen in the latter time of the indignation, for at the appointed time the end shall be." So this is totally amazing that the angel Gabriel came down and someone told Gabriel, "Hey, Gabriel, make Daniel understand this vision." Remember, he's by the river Eli in Elam, in Iran, Persia. And Gabriel told him, this vision refers to the time of the end. Again, my friends, the time of the end is the time of the end. It cannot be coming from Nebuchadnezzar, Cyrus, and Alexander, which some people put Cyrus and Alexander in this prophecy, Alexander the Great in the Grecian Empire, the large horn. It cannot be that. It's the time of the end is the time of the end. Again, 6,000 completed years. If you're going to put it in the middle there, that runs into a lot of problems with eschatology when you put something that far back. Again, these kingdoms are going to be in sequence. Just like they were before, they're going to be in sequence. I believe it's Daniel 2 said for the latter days, also in the days of these kings, Messiah will come. They're going to be in sequence. This one's saying it's the time of the end. Then he continues. He confirms it 2 more times. I'm making known to you what shall happen in the latter time of the indignation. So that, again, the end of the age. And then for at the appointed time, the end shall be. So again, he's confirming 3 times that this vision is for the end of the age. Just like Daniel 12:4 said, his book is sealed until the end. You can try to unseal it before, but it's still sealed until the end of the age. Okay, so it's so important that the angel Gabriel himself says that this vision, Daniel 8, which confirms Daniel 2 and 7 for the end of the age as well. Daniel 2 says it. Daniel 7, there's a sequence of events, including a courts of heaven scene when the judgment's made for the Messiah to return. And this is no difference. He confirms it 3 times to us that this is for the end of the age. Okay, so now let's look at the interpretation of who is the ram, who is the goat, and this is going to give us great insight and also confirm what we've discussed in Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. In verse 20 it says this, "The ram which you saw having the 2 horns, these are the kings of Media and Persia, and the male goat is the kingdom of Greece, which is Yavon. The large horn that is between its eyes is the first king. As for the broken horn that stood up, and the 4 horns that stood up in its place, 4 kingdoms shall rise out of that nation, but not with its power. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their fullness, a king shall rise, having fierce features, who understands sinister schemes. His power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. He shall destroy fearfully, and shall prosper and thrive. He shall destroy the mighty and also the holy people. Through his cunning he shall cause deceit to prosper under his rule, and he shall exalt himself in his heart. He shall destroy many in their prosperity. He shall even rise against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without human means. And the vision of the evenings and mornings which was told is true. Therefore seal up the vision, for it refers to many days in the future. And I, Daniel, fainted and was very sick for days. Afterward I rose and went about the king's business. I was astonished by the vision, but no one understood it. So Gabriel gives us a great understanding about this vision that the prophet Daniel saw. He tells us the ram is Medo-Persia, which is Iran. The Medes are, you can look at as the Kurds of today, and then Persia is Iran. Remember, there was a horn that came up, and then a larger horn came up, which means the power of that will be tilted towards Persia. They will be the dominant superpower, if you will, of these two, of course. And you're seeing that starting to come. We're about to go into some of these statistics and what's going on in the Middle East. But he says that it's Medo-Persia, which is Iran. And then the male goat coming from the west is going to be Yavon. It says Greece in your Bible, but it is Yavon. It is Turkey. And then it says the large horn that is between its eyes is the first king. So again, this prophecy is for the end of the ages, for the latter time of indignation, just like the angel Gabriel said, and it's telling you there's going to be a collision, okay, for supremacy of the Middle East, which goes with Daniel 2, also goes with Daniel 7. Remember, the second kingdom's Iran, third kingdom is Turkey, just like we've discovered in Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. And now this is the transition between the second kingdom and the third kingdom. And you have the Turkey will conquer, it will rage against, it will crush Iran as we go forward to the end of the age. And then once that happens, once Turkey crushes Iran, it says the large horn will be broken, which means the leader will no longer be in power, whether by death or whatever that may be. Okay, and once the large horn is broken, then it splits into 4 kingdoms, and it clearly says that 4 kingdoms shall rise out of that nation, but not with its power. So again, horns is symbolic for kingdom. So that's what we said in last week's video. 3 of the 10 kings of the Antichrist kingdom is Egypt, Libya, and Sudan. Daniel 11, 40 through 43, you can find that for yourself. Then once this transition happens as well, which it all go together, once this transition between Iran and Turkey becomes great, it splits into 4 regions or 4 kingdoms. There's 4 kings of the Antichrist kingdom. It says that right now, 4 kingdoms. So 4 there, 3 in North Africa. So there's 7 of the 10 kings. But the Antichrist will rise from the 4 that is in the Turkey area. And when I say Turkey area, I would say Turkey, Syria, and Iraq, Iran area. That area will be 4 kingdoms, okay? And it specifically says that, which goes in, that's 4 of the 10 kings of the Antichrist kingdom, okay? And then when we look at it at the latter time of their kingdom, okay, the 4 kings, when the transgressors have reached their fullness, a king shall rise, having fierce features, who understands sinister schemes. His power shall be mighty, not by his own power, because Satan will incarnate the Antichrist. This is speaking about the Antichrist, which is the little horn. He will destroy fearfully and shall prosper and thrive, take away the daily sacrifices. He'll do all of these things. He'll exalt himself. He's very cunning. As we know, who else is cunning? Satan in the garden was very cunning. And he shall rise against the prince of princes. That's Messiah, that's Yeshua. And he will be broken without human means. Messiah will conquer him, subdue him, and throw him in the pit of hell. And then it says that the visions of the mornings and the evenings, which is told, was true, and then seal up the vision until the time of the end. So we have to understand, my friends, that this vision is for the end of the age. It's the transitional kingdoms from the second to the third. It goes with Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. This chapter is in here to show you that transition. And then, as we saw, you have a direct roadmap to what's going on. Once he rises out of one of the 4 regions or kingdoms of the Turkey, Iraq, Syria, then he goes south, just like the prophecy says. He goes south. He goes east, he goes south towards the glorious land. He goes to abominate the temple and all of these things that we know he does. So This vision in Daniel 8 goes perfectly with Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 as the transitional chapter between the second kingdom and the third kingdom. And we have the confirmations of the four kingdoms in Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. And as we know, during that time when the four kings rise out of Turkey area, Syria, Iraq, the other seven will rise. And then you have the 10 kings of the Antichrist kingdom. At the time of when they've reached their power, that's when the Antichrist will rise among them, just like this says, he rises among the four. In Daniel 7, it says he arises among the 10. Same thing, he's just telling you, it's getting more specific where to look for with the Antichrist out of the four kings instead of out of all the Middle East and North Africa. It's telling you, look at the Turkey, Syria, Iraq region. That's why he's called the king of the north, Turkey. That's why he's called the king of Babylon, which is Iraq. That's why he's called, the Assyrian, the king of Assyria, the prince of Tyre, which is in Lebanon. All these names are the Antichrist names in the biblical prophets of Isaiah, Ezekiel. Isaiah 13 through 23 goes through that. Ezekiel 25 through 32 goes through that. And the prophet Jeremiah as well. But he's giving you these literal names of the Antichrist to show you that region. We went through it in my book series of God's fishermen and Satan's hunters. He's giving you that region to understand. Look at the Turkey, Iraq, Syria, Iran region, Lebanon region. That's where the Antichrist will rise from the four regions. Okay, and yes, he comes up among the 10, but then Daniel 8 gets it more specific and say, hey, look at this specific area. Don't even look at North Africa. Yeah, he conquers Egypt, he conquers Sudan, he conquers Libya, but he's going to rise from that Fertile Crescent area in the Middle East. So how can we look at this today? As we discussed with the other videos in Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, I believe that the Middle East is in its final explosion. And I believe that started in 2003 with the dethroning of Saddam Hussein from Iraq. I believe that was the first kingdom. The Babylon area is what it was speaking of. Okay, so he was dethroned in 2003 and obviously executed and hung, but then Medo-Persia started their land grab, if you will. They started their movement, if you will. Remember, the vision in Daniel 8 says they go northward, westward, and southward. Now, some will believe that's a military conflict, and it well could be, here in the future. But I believe for sure they have spread their antennas, if you will, their proxy wars, also their influence, if you will, in Yemen, which is southward, in Iraq. They basically control Iraq, in Syria. They're great leverage with Assad because they've propped him up during his own civil war. They got major influence with Hezbollah. They've got major influence in Gaza with Hamas. So they have tried to spread their Shia crescent across the Middle East, the Fertile Crescent, to the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, so to a certain extent, they have done what Daniel has said: northward, southward, westward. And now, could it be of a military conflict in the future? Absolutely, it could. But for right now, for sure, they've gone in with major influence and proxy wars, terror, and all these things across the Middle East. Just like the prophet said, they have become great. They are the superior, dominant superpower of the Middle East. There's no question about that. No matter, you can ask any political, religious leader, whoever it may be, and they'll tell you that they are the superpower of the Middle East. And then what do we know? We see this goat, we see Turkey, we see Yavon, we see him rising up, going across to crush him, to rage against him with furious anger. This is not a peaceful transition. Okay, this is a war. This is for the dominant supremacy of the Middle East. And the Fertile Crescent is where it is. When you look at the upheaval, you look at the government anarchy, the civilian unrest from 2003 through the Arab Spring in 2011 and 2014, you're seeing this is ripe for a leader to come in and to swoop up this land. Now, Iran has put their claims on it, but again, Turkey and their current president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, he has his own plans for that land as well, that region as well, because that's where the Ottoman Empire has come from. The Turkish Empire that ruled for 500 years in the Middle East, that's their land in Syria and Iraq. That's how he's looking at it. And so it's so important to understand the players in this and realize that the supreme leaders of Iran. I mean, they're getting very old, and we'll see what happens when the current Ayatollah passes away, Khomeini. We'll see what happens after that. We'll see. But we have to understand that Turkey is rising, Erdogan is rising, he has been rising, and we're going to go through a couple of understanding of how he's looking at this, and you can do your own research, but he's moving in a tremendous way, and it's so important to understand that. If you're not familiar with the Ottoman Empire ruled the Middle East for approximately 500 years, but in 1923 they fell. They started to fall in 1916-17, which was the Shemitah year, and then they collapsed on the Shemitah in 1923-1924 area, and they became a republic. So they collapsed. The Ottoman Empire collapsed in 1923-1924 area, that Shemitah year. And how Erdogan is looking at this, and we mentioned this on the other video, is what he believes is in their prophecies, the Islamic prophecies, the Hadith, the Quran, etc. And this is what he believes, and I'm not suggesting someone go read those materials. I just know the basics of some of what they believe. But how he's looking at it and why he's pronounced that 2023 is a great marker for him to have the revived Ottoman Empire, if you will, because of what he believes. And it's so important to understand this, that 1923 they collapsed, but in his understanding that every 100 years Allah will raise a caliph or a king over a caliphate or a kingdom. So he believes he is that caliph that's going to rule over the caliphate. Okay, and that's why you're seeing this aggression. That's why you're seeing him move the way he's moving, especially in the last couple of years. You're seeing him move towards that goal because he believes in 2023 that Allah, quote unquote, will give him the authority to rule over the ancient land areas of the Ottoman Empire, to revive it. He's very enamored with this. I mean, he's very possessed with it, in my opinion, when you do your research on it. And that's why he keeps telling people 2023, 2023, 2023 is where his goals are. So it's important to realize that as we go forward, that that's what his goals are. I personally believe that the Lord God Almighty will allow him to reach his goals. That's my personal opinion, just because you're starting to see the prophecies move of the second kingdom and the third kingdom. Again, we're already at the second kingdom. Turkey's the third kingdom. So I believe he is the one that's going to basically tee it up, if you will, for the eventual Antichrist to come and reign. Okay, so there's a process. Remember, there's a first king in Daniel 8. And then after that first king, that large horn's broken or is no longer in power, or however that looks, then it's four kingdoms that come out of that. And then the final hunter, the final Antichrist, if you will, the one that will rule during the 7 years, if you will, the last 3.5 years, he will rise after the first king. So it's so important to realize the process of this and the journey of this, that what Daniel 8 has provided for us, that journey, that timeline, if you will, that goes into Daniel 2, that goes into Daniel 7 as well. But it's important to realize that in 2015, and we'll go through a little history real quick and summarize it, but I would hopefully encourage you to do your own research on this and see, do your research on Erdogan and what he's done since 2001 with the AKP party. But basically, he's clamped down on the nation, trying to reform it as the tyrannical Ottoman Empire, the revival one. Turkey used to be a republic. Most people will still think Turkey is a republic, but it has definitely transitioned into a not so friendly place for Christians and also the Jewish people. But in 2015, something happened that was pretty interesting to me. That the Kaaba stone in Saudi Arabia, I think, is very holy to the Muslim people, obviously the Islamic nations and things like that. And they don't just, I believe, do this just to do it. Okay, so he was in Saudi Arabia at that time, 2015. And it was kind of like an anointing of him as the next Muslim leader, if you will. There was articles that were written that he was considered basically the Islamic leader of the Middle East. You can find that. I think CNN Network covered that as well. But he was basically, if you will, anointed at that time as the next Muslim leader. And I think the majority of the Muslim people over there would suggest that he is the one that is their leader as a whole, if they had to choose one. So I thought that was just very important when we look at 2015, that it all starts, it keeps going, the process still keeps building, and then it's the final explosion, if you will. But in 2016, July 15th, 2016, something else interesting happened that again proves the point of what he's wanting to do with the nation of Turkey. There was a coup d'etat there, and most would believe, including me, that he staged this. I mean, there's so much evidence that he just staged this so that he could clamp down on the people even more, kind of like a reverse psychology kind of thing, so that he could reverse, or he could clamp down on the people even more. And since once that happened, what he did after that is pretty interesting and kind of proves the point. After that, he purged, basically, he arrested 123,000 citizens. Think about that. After the coup, he arrested 123,000 citizens. He also arrested 300 journalists. He fired 145,000 people in the government. He removed 9,000 people that were teachers, professors, etc. He closed 2,000 schools. He shut down 200 media outlets, and he dismissed 5,000 judges. I mean, think about that. I mean, that is just unheard of in today's society for a leader of a quote-unquote republic to do these things that he's doing. And you can see that overall, the world is quiet and has allowed him to do these things. Okay, even though there has been some who come out against him, the European Union, etc. Also in April in 2017, in April of that year, there was a constitutional referendum, okay, which would basically give him sweeping powers, total control, if you will, or some would call a dictatorship. But he won that. He won that referendum of the Constitution, and now he does have the sweeping powers. It's a presidential system, no longer a parliamentary system as well. So it's just important to see this escalate and what his vision is for the Turkish people, number one, for Christians and for Jews, for everybody in that nation, but also what he plans on doing in the Middle East with the land areas, the geographical land areas that he believes is the Ottoman is in that's his land and not Syria or not Iraq or not anyone else's. Okay, as we fast forward also to August 24th, 2016, this will show you again how enamored he is with, fascinated he is with the culture, with the sultans, with the Ottoman Empire sultans, that's what he wants to be. He wants to be the sultan. He wants to be the dictator, so to speak. And on August 24th, 2016, this is when he invaded Syria. Okay, and this date is so important because on August 24th, 1516, which is the 500th anniversary of when the first sultan, the first dictator of the Ottoman Empire, he went into Dabiq, Syria as well. Erdogan went into Dabiq, Syria as just as well to establish that template or that pattern that we keep talking about in videos. He wants to become the sultan. He's expecting the same results that the first sultan received, and that is to control the Middle East as long as he possibly can. So it's not by coincidence on August 24th, 2016 that he invaded Syria by going into Dabiq, and it was the 500th anniversary to the day of when the first sultan went into the Syria as well, and then became the leader or Turkey became the leader of the Middle East for the last 400 years after that. So it's very important when we look at that. Syria is very important to him. Iraq is very important to him, again, because he believes that that is the land area that is the Ottomans, not anyone else's. And this is what he said when they were entering in on that day, on the 500th anniversary of the Battle of Dabiq. Okay, this is what he said. Syria is responsible for the terrorism since it refuses to accept our solutions. When we speak of Syria or the Balkans or the Caucasus, these were part of the Ottoman geography from 100 years ago. I believe we will overcome all the obstacles in front of us, which will be the will of Allah. Turkey has a massive power and will use it. We are more confident today about our future because since the morning of the July the 15th, which is the Turkey coup, we are more powerful. We are now in a place that looks more hopeful. Our commitment in achieving the 2023 target. Turkey will cut off the front foot with the diplomatic games. We will continue to remove those who played their games. And then he continued and said, what I promised in Syria, Iraq, the Balkans, and the Caucasus is now within reach. So it's so important to understand where he's coming from. Like we said, this is what he believes, that this is the land of the Ottomans. You know, he's telling you what his goals are. The geography from 100 years ago, remember what we said, he thinks 100 years, 2023, Allah will give him that leadway, that right to obtain his goal, so to speak. So this is so important. Syria, Iraq, the Balkans, the Caucasus, 2023 target. I'm not saying he's going to do that, but if the Lord will allow him to do it, the true God of Israel will allow him to fulfill his prophecies, just like Nebuchadnezzar, just like he will use anyone, Cyrus or anyone, to fulfill his prophecies. And it's so important to understand this as we go forward, his mindset, his intentions. And then when you fast forward to, and since that time there's been more clampdown, there's been more just control, if you will, of this stuff with the elections and all this thing. I think he has power until 2029, I believe, so to speak. I mean, sweeping powers. So we're going to see what happens in the next 8 years with this guy. But this guy's a very interesting guy. I think he's very dangerous, but will God allow him to reach his goals? We'll have to find out. I personally believe he will. But when you look at this past year in 2020, while we're all focused in America, which we should have been, on the presidential election, also the coronavirus, and the world was really focused on that, he really made a tremendous move in the Middle East, which goes into Daniel 2, Daniel 7, and Daniel 8, especially Daniel 8, the transition between the second and the third kingdom. He went into Libya with troops. Remember, Libya is still in an ongoing civil war to a certain degree because Gaddafi fell in the Arab Spring, and it's just been government anarchy, chaos, civilian unrest, you name it, in Libya. And he went in, I believe, with 10,000 troops, if I'm not mistaken, but he's got troops in Libya. He's forming alliances in Algeria. You know, Egypt is very nervous with this guy because remember, the king of the north, the king of the south in Daniel 11, Egypt is the king of the south, Turkey is the king of the north. So Egypt's very nervous right now. He's got great relations in Sudan as well, Erdogan has. So you got Libya and Sudan, which is two of the three countries, and Egypt, the three countries that the Antichrist will conquer. And you see what Erdogan's doing, again, teeing it up. Libya, Sudan, Egypt's nervous. And then what does he do? He goes further into Syria. You know, he goes further into Syria. In my mind, Assad is a pawn waiting to be conquered, in my opinion, by the king of the north, if you will. So I believe it's setting up this showdown. He's getting his alliances. He's into Syria even more. He's into Iraq, and he's pushing the Kurds. Remember, the Daniel 8 prophecy is you've got the Medes and the Persians together. Well, if it's for the end of the age, the Medes is the Kurds. They're the kinsmen of the Kurds. The Medes are, or vice versa. So then you have Persia, Iran. Well, what he's done is he's pushing them to the river of Ulai, actually, is what he's doing. And I believe he's going to do it. He's going to push the Kurds away because the Kurds control the region between these four countries, Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. In that area, they have a little village, if you will, a nation, whatever you want to call it. And I believe he's going to push them out of Turkey. He's going to push them out of Iraq. He's going to push them out of Syria to Iran. And I believe you're starting to see that because he's gone further into Iraq as well. Remember, Syria and Iraq is, in his mind, is his territory. So he doesn't think he's violating any laws. In fact, he's put out maps that includes the Turkish region with Syria and Iraq. I mean, it's pretty phenomenal, crazy what this guy thinks and what he's doing, but he's doing it for a reason, and that's setting it up. Because remember, Iran is into Iraq. They're into Syria. Heavily. They're heavily into Syria, heavily into Iraq, Lebanon, Hezbollah, Hamas. So they've spread their Shia crescent across the Fertile Crescent. And now you're going to see this goat, and I believe that river of Ulai, the Iraq area, the Syria area, it is going to be the clash that you're going to see, the ram and the goat. And as the prophet states, Turkey will win this war. Now, some look at this prophet as historical, so whatever the case may be, there will be a transition between Iran and Turkey because it doesn't take away Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. You're going to see the sequence of these kingdoms come to fruition, and we're in the second kingdom now, in my opinion. You're going to see the third kingdom, however that looks, whether it's Daniel 8 or not, they're going to be the supremacy, a dominant superpower. And then you've got a roadmap in Daniel 8 onto the end of the age. Now, I personally believe Daniel 8 will come to fruition, because you got two sects of Islam, Shia and Sunni. And remember, in Daniel 2, what we discovered in the first part of the series is it's mixed. There's going to be partly strong, partly fragile. Well, strong is going to be Turkey and the Sunnis. Fragile is going to be Iran. How could that happen if they're the dominant superpower of the Middle East right now? Iran, because they get crushed by Turkey. They were raged against. He tramples them, the goat does. So that's, in my opinion, what's going to happen is this major collision, this major war for supremacy of the Middle East, Sunni versus Shia. The Shia will go underneath them, and for the goal of Islam, they will come together. Ezekiel 38, in Revelation 17:18, Revelation 13, they'll come together as one beast kingdom, like we've discovered. The lion, the bear, the leopard, all of the conglomerated land area, they will come together for the destruction of Israel. That's what they're going to try to do. They will come together and put their differences aside. They will come together. Persia's underneath Turkey in Ezekiel 38:39. So that tells you there's a transition, no matter how someone looks at it, Daniel 8 or not. There's a transition between Turkey and Iran. Turkey is the nation to look out for. You're seeing it with Erdogan. So it's really, you're seeing this movement going on. We'll see what happens once we go forward into 2021, 2022, 2023, which is his goal, Erdogan's goal. So I would encourage you to do your own research on both Iran and Turkey, the leaders, and see what the Holy Spirit leads you according to the scriptures. Of course, Daniel 2, 7, and 8. So friends, this wraps up our three-part video series, and I hope you've been with us and enjoyed it. The three-part series, I hope this gives some insight and something to pray into. And if you have anything, please email me at chad@faithfulperformance.com, and I'll be happy to receive whatever you got and talk about whatever the Holy Spirit's leading you as well. But it's so important to dive into these four kingdoms, Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Daniel 8, Daniel 11, all of these beautiful scriptures that he's given us with a basic understanding of. That's how we know we're at the end of the age, is the four kingdoms. Now, obviously the creation plan, obviously 48, 67, Israel becoming a nation and recapturing Jerusalem. But now it's about these kingdoms, these four kingdoms that were going to overlap each other with the territory, kind of like Daniel 2 says. And then the stone will come and it will crush the conglomerate kingdom, the lion, the bear, the leopard. It will crush them together, like Daniel 2, Daniel 7 says. And the stone, the Messiah, will rule for 1,000 years, which will be the seventh day, the 7,000th year. So friends, I hope this has been helpful. I'm sure we're going to discover Daniel 2, 7, and 8 as we go forward, as more revelation comes, not only through the scriptures, but also in the physical, as we see these events take place in the Middle East and North Africa, with the ultimate purpose and goal for the King to return, the Messiah to return, to establish righteousness and justice among the nations, which we are hopeful for, and we want him to come do for all of us. So friends, I hope this has been helpful for you. Until next time, may God bless you. May he keep you. May his face shine upon you and give you his grace. May he lift up his countenance upon you and your family and give you guys his everlasting shalom. My name is Chadwick, and you've reached Faithful Performance.